Hi, I'm Mira Schaefer, and I'm going to be talking to you today about nutritional influence on reproductive success in postpartum cattle. This ties pretty closely into my current research project on cyclicity and the importance of the time period between calving and the first ovulation. So today I'll be focusing on the transition stage of cattle. So that's the time between calving and the first ovulation, which is when their cycle officially resumes. It's a key factor in determining reproductive success. The earlier they begin recycling and ovulating, the sooner that they can be rebred, and thus cutting down the cost for feeding them in a time period when they're not currently pregnant. Intensity and timing of first ovulation impacts the success and timing of ovulation of all the successive cycles. So from that first time that they ovulate, it really impacts the intensity of the cycle, the timing of it. So making sure that that first cycle is as soon as and as intense as possible is really important for ensuring the most reproductive success possible. And that is ultimately determined by follicular growth. So one of the main issues that's nutritionally related in postpartum cattle is negative energy balance. So when cows calve in, they expend all their energy towards lactogenesis, which is the beginning of lactation. And thus, all of their energy that they're taking in through dietary consumption is not enough to balance out the energy they're expending. So there's a complete imbalance between energy utilized and dietary intake. And because of the amount of nutrients and energy being partitioned towards the mammary gland, there's also a significant drop in insulin levels in the blood. And less insulin means that glucose in the blood is not being allocated towards peripheral tissues. There's rapid lipid mobilization, which causes triglycerides to be broken down into non-esterified fatty acids and glycerol through the process of lipolysis. And thus the body condition of the cow is rapidly decreasing during this first transition period after calving. And this has negative repercussions on reproductive success throughout the entirety of the cow's next cycle. This is a brief figure that demonstrates the time period of negative energy balance after calving, and we can kind of see how that's related to body condition score and the dry matter intake being done at the time, and also milk production. So one of the main things we need to consider when talking about reproductive success is the interval until ovulation. And one of the main nutritional based things that are caused by negative energy balance is the decrease in body condition score after calving. So the more significant this body condition score decreases, the longer it's going to take until that first ovulation occurs. And this is because high negative energy balance causes a decrease of GnRH in the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. So that's the axis of blood that connects the ovaries, the pituitary, and the hypothalamus, starting in the hypothalamus, which is where GnRH is released. So the lower the GnRH levels that are being released, the less luteinizing hormone is going to be in circulation in the blood. And luteinizing hormone has a direct impact on the time it takes for ovulation. This is through two main methods. So luteinizing hormone is the hormone that builds up and causes ovulation through a surge. So if there's less luteinizing hormone in circulation and a lower pulse frequency, it's going to take much longer for that surge to occur. Also, luteinizing hormone is a regulatory hormone for estrogen production in the ovaries. So if we have less luteinizing hormone in circulation, we also have less estrogen in production, and estrogen is an important hormone in ovulation. So this would set back ovulation for a time period as well. Another thing that really needs to be considered when talking about reproductive success is oocyte quality. So long periods of negative energy balance causes a decrease in oocyte quality. This is because of the alterations in the liver, which lowers the concentration of growth hormone receptors, insulin growth factor binding proteins, and then especially insulin-like growth factor 1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 binding causes steroidogenesis, which is essential for production of steroid hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and GnRH, which we previously discussed. And in the corner on the side of the screen here, you can see that this is the HPO axis I referenced earlier. So it has the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the luteinizing hormone we previously discussed, and then it goes to the ovaries. So now that we've established that steroid hormones are going to be in low circulation as a result of negative energy balance, we can really talk about what the consequences of that will be. So we'll start with progesterone, which is the hormone that everybody thinks about when they talk about regulating pregnancy. Progesterone is essential for regulating pregnancy, but it's also essential for embryo implantation after ovulation and for just maintaining the general uterine environment that makes pregnancy possible. Estrogen, which is the key hormone in follicular development. If that's not in high quantities, then the follicle is not developing efficiently, and there may be some issues with developing a dominant follicle to be ovulated off. GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, it regulates the other hormones we previously discussed, like follicular stimulating hormone and LH, and it lowers the overall follicular development and oocyte quality. So this is a slide that basically summarizes what we've already talked about with negative energy balance and its negative impacts on reproductive cyclicity. So you'll see here that we have the energy shortage, which is the negative energy balance, and the decreased glucose availability, which causes issues with the liver. The liver causes a decrease in the insulin-like growth factor 1, which causes issues with follicular growth. There's issues with the production of estrogen, which leads to ultimately delayed ovulation. There's also issues with oocyte development and quality, and ultimately issues with uterus development and embryo development. So in conjunction with negative energy balance, we also have negative protein balance, which is not maybe talked about as much. This is when the same thing occurs where protein is being regulated towards the mammary gland for milk production, and because there's less protein available, that it starts pulling it from body tissues. So this causes producers with lactating cows to usually feed a pretty high crude protein diet, but this can have some pretty negative consequences, even though it does encourage high milk production. So overall, high protein diets can have impacts on the uterine conditions and embryonic development. So when we're talking about high production cattle, we're talking about cows that need a lot of protein in their diets. And because producers feed them this high quantity of protein, they have a lot of blood nitrogen being formed. Blood nitrogen is a huge issue when it comes to embryonic development. So when you have blood nitrogen, it's in the form of blood urea and ammonia. This blood urea or plasma urea is inversely related to uterine luminal pH. So when you have a high level of blood urea, which is a result of high protein consumption, then you have a low pH in your uterus. And this makes it really difficult for embryos to be implanted onto the uterine lining and can cause issues further with embryo development due to the acidity of the environment. So all of this really circles back around to body condition score at the time of calving. It's really essential that producers pay close attention to their cows at time of calving and then during their transition period. Cows should be calving in at about a body condition score of a 3 to a 3.5, and this is to ensure there's not too significant of a drop after calving in the body condition score, because that has some pretty dramatic impacts on the negative energy balance and then metabolic diseases. And body condition score can be maintained pretty well if there's a consistency in the feed before and after calving, which is really essential to minimizing reproductive loss. So now we'll circle back to what can farmers do with nutrition to ensure reproductive success. And that really comes around back to body condition score. I can't emphasize it enough. If we make sure that cows are calving in at a 3.5 range and are not losing too much condition after calving, we can really minimize most of the reproductive losses from nutrition. The main ways we can do that is consistent dry matter intake. It's important that cows are eating the same amount before and after calving, and this minimizes body condition loss and overall negative energy balance issues. Now cows lose their appetites after calving, and that's to be expected, but we can kind of curb this issue through the inclusion of lipids in the diet. Lipids have a high energy density, so you're getting more bang for your buck. if you will, and they have an increased palatability, which will cause an increase in your dry matter intake and a decrease in your negative energy balance. Ionophores can also be included in the diet, and this will cause a decreased issue with plasma urea levels because it controls protein digestion. Forages should definitely also be included in the diet. Cud chewing produces buffers in the saliva, and that maintains your ruminal pH. Carbohydrates are also essential for providing energy, which minimizes your negative energy balance in cattle. So any questions, you guys can reach out to me and email me. I'd be happy to answer anything you have, and thank you for listening to me today. And this is a slide with my references. And again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, and I'd love to answer anything you have to ask.